sessions. So we'll have to keep it a little shorter, but my brain's fried, honestly. So my apologies. You'll be lucky to get anything out of me. So my first session was development with Matt Hooper, Duncan McFarland, and Stephen, and I can't pronounce your name, Stephen. I'm very sorry. So one of the first things we talked about was attracting investors. How do we do that? And this, out of maybe every subject we talked about, was most dear to the independent filmmakers. They were the most motivated by this topic, and they were the most interested in it. So I almost think maybe we need workshops based on that, of, how we can approach and attract investors. So there was a lot of discussion about understanding exactly what it is you're offering to these investors, and how do you do that? Well, and then we got into a lot of detailed things, and it was brutal. So the kind of documentation that you need to have, the kind of legal forms that you need to have, the kind of entities that you need to create, and how they need to be arranged, and the operating agreements. And I'm going to spare you because it made my brain hurt. But both Duncan and Matt are willing to talk about these things with filmmakers, sometimes just for the price of a cup of coffee. But
don't abuse that.
Don't, yeah, please don't. I'm throwing their services away for free. But that, when we got down to it, that was primarily the way that you attracted investors, is having an attractive package of a product. And it's not just going, I have this great idea for a film that's so dear to me, because nobody cares. Because we talked a lot, how do we educate investors? Investors are educated. That is why they do not invest in independent film. It's not educating investors, it's having a product that will return on investment. So that's what it boiled down to. And frankly, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of things that as independent filmmakers, we generally don't understand that well. So we talked a little bit about scripts and how we can improve those, how we can collaborate properly. And Stephen especially talked about a thing called a coverage report. And a coverage report is something you can pay to have done, which is a critique of your script. But it's not a review, it's more a discussion of how viable this is as a product. And even some festivals can give you a coverage report. I don't understand what a coverage report is that well, but it's something that is indeed fairly important and that you can get. We talked quite a bit about this collaborating with scripts, and the thing that kept coming back was how important it is to have your agreements in place. If you're writing with somebody, are they an employee? Are they an independent contractor? Are they a partner? If you don't have anything in writing, the default is that they're a partner. That is the way that the laws work. And that makes things go to hell in a handbasket really quick on almost every occasion. Let's see. So we also talked about how we can improve the scripts, and the panelists talked about how difficult writing is, and it's often the hardest part of making a good film because everything's been done before, and directors suck at writing. I'm quoting, totally quoting. So there's a need to collaborate and get a good product with scripts, because you don't want to approach an investor with an incomplete product or a bad product, because you'll never get to speak to them again. We talked about whether one should copyright their work or use the WGA. One of the panelists actually laughed when I said WGA, and he corrected himself, but the point is that the WGA does not have the same legal value that a copyright does. The copyright gives you a legal standing for which you can sue someone and get damages. So they said copyright. And it is true that once you do make something, you have a copyright, but registering it gives you additional legal standing. Okay, I think I'm running out of time. Okay, did I just totally running over?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, yeah.
I've covered the, Darlene, did I miss anything just huge?
Budget.
Budget.
Middle budget.
Okay, you know what, I'm gonna skip that.
Doesn't Jeff skip that part?
Everybody, I'm sorry, I just totally blew it. We're gonna have this all later. I told myself I wouldn't do this. But the last point I just want to highlight is that you need to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are. And he said that is the #1 filmmaker thing that filmmakers do not do, because
And
they
then listen
cannot
to them.
listen to them. That was it. Yeah, it was it. Yeah, if you're gonna hire a lawyer, you got to listen to them. Okay, I'm running over. So, Kat, you want to go ahead and come up?
Awesome, yes. I was the pre-production panel. And we actually took notes because Jess and I are high tech. Okay, so what we started with was the business plan. And much like you guys, we actually talked about the business plan and came at it from a completely different perspective, where they were talking about the business plan as what you need to get your investors and to get your funding and to get started in the first place. We were discussing the business plan as the model that you must have to move forward with any cohesion whatsoever without things going to hell in a handbasket. So with the business plan, you need to work the business plan from your budget. So don't just do it to get investors. Once you have your investors, use your budget to define your business plan. Trying to attract talent and the best team. What do you have to offer them is pretty much what it boils down to. If you don't invest in yourself and your own brand and give them a reason to work with you, you're never going to get the people that you want to work with you. Directors need to work with actors. That's a #1 priority. They must know how to work with actors. And preferably, in the best case scenario, a director should never produce. They should be separated out so that the producer can in some part insulate the director and the director can focus on the artistic. What are red flags when you're looking for a producer? So what are your good questions to ask? Well, again, why would they be attracted to you? You can go back to the film school model and team after team, you just use the same people. Once you've worked with people and you know them, allow your second tier people to choose their own teams. Give them autonomy, because if they're happy working with the people they want to work with, they're going to be happy working for you. Probably the largest mistake, never check references, is when you don't check the references. One of the biggest mistakes you can make. Read between the lines when you're talking to people. If they're too enthusiastic, they might be crazy. And again, I'm just quoting. What does the producer do? Hey, we only got to that towards the end. You get the script, you get the budget, you write the business plan, you schedule. You find a team, you find a director, and you do play the good cop, bad cop. I think probably the most pithy quote of the whole session was, prep hard, shoot easy. Thank you, Chris, wherever you are. When you're producing and in your pre-production, you need to make decisions. Everybody does. The producer and the director most especially. The more decisions you can make, the sooner in your process, the better off you're going to be. And lastly, I asked everybody, what is the one essential person that any production cannot live without? We got 3 good answers. One is a location manager, the person who actually handles everything, because if you don't have those settled, you don't have them locked down, you don't actually, like they said, well, we don't have a location. What color are we going to paint the walls? We don't even have any freaking walls. How can we paint them a color? So you need that so early on in the process that is an essential person. The second answer was craft services. Food, it always comes back to food. If you are honest and upfront about what you can and can't do, even if you can only do PB&J, if you say, we're really sorry, this is all we have, but you're telling them up front, more power to you. And the third answer was a casting director, because if you actually get the right people working for you, both personally and talent-wise, then you're only going to be smooth sailing from there on. So now, there he is. Awesome. Off to you, Steve.
If I didn't meet you in one of those, I moderated two today, but we're just going to do production right now.
Yeah,
The
just
morning one first.
morning one
Okay.
first.
I'm Steve Edmiston, and we had on our panel Amy Lillard, James Keblis, Megan Griffiths, and David Schulman. And I've just been handed all these notes, so it's really I didn't take them. So that's really challenging. I think number one, even though it was the production panel, I think we really got tagged at the beginning of the discussion. I think it was healthy about the notion of art versus commerce in this process and how that impacts any production that should get launched. And so we probably spent an inordinate amount of time in that debate, and I think the conclusion was a healthy one, which is to a certain extent there's a place for both. The problem seems to arise in this process, at least in terms of our discussion, when if we're doing it for art and there's a small audience, we're nonetheless going out and raising $1 million, and then that investor is disappointed because we made an art film that had a small niche audience versus that commercial project that might have justified that budget, or versus putting your budget in a box for that small project. So there was really, I think, a good, healthy discussion. I actually pinned, I think, Adam and Amy down a little bit with their different organizations, taking a single film example and continuing kind of to push them and say, well, if it comes in and this is a Nickelodeon project or this is a a Sundance project, are you going to say yes or no? And so we kind of got to some different viewpoints in terms of how our local organizations are looking at films and what to get behind in a certain way. So that was a great discussion. We also talked about just the general education of our filmmaking community in terms of running the business of being a filmmaker. And what can we do to improve that as part of the production process so we can take that storytelling component and really bring a business underlie or business overlay to that component. And there was a lot of discussion around that. Our room was interested. The number one checkbox was what are lower cost, what are resources that allow us as filmmakers to make films on these lower budgets? What's out there? Some of the ideas that got a lot of discussion, you may know them, you may not know them. One is Northwest Film Forum's 501c3 status for films if you want to bring donors in, that you can be under their umbrella. That was discussed. We had a lot of discussion about the new FilmWorks Innovation Lab. You probably all know about that. If you don't, you should definitely discover that for the next round. The Innovation Lab is a wonderful program where we're taking that film incentive program that used to be floored at $500,000, and now we're flooring it down to $50,000, so that those of us in Washington making films at a lower budget have access to that potentially 30% rebate. Very, very big deal. Lots of discussion around that. One of the really neat parts of that discussion in the room was that application for that program really put the filmmakers through the paces. So we talked about being a better business person as a filmmaker. If you look at that application, it starts out with a film finance plan and how you're going to get there and what are the contracts. Show us the contracts. Who are the investors? Just really nail it. Then what's your marketing plan? What's your distribution plan? What are the bios of the key? Anything an investor would ask is being asked. That's a really good exercise. Oh yeah, a complete production budget. So we had a lot of discussion around that. James Keblis had a number of remarks about the great human capital that we have in this city and how to access it through a number of the call boards. Northwest Film Forum has one of them, which is just terrific. Let's see what else we covered. We covered a lot. a lot. I'm going to skip it. Oh, one of the things that was discussed, there was this discussion, how do I get involved in film? I want to get involved in production. I have no experience or near to no experience. And there was a number of discussions about how to do that. One that came up, and we had Kirk Nordstrom in the room, who runs the 48-Hour Film Project here in Seattle, was to do as many of those types of projects as you can. I mean, literally in a year, you could get 6 credits under your belt doing almost anything on a project like that if you're willing to work your butt off, because those are 2-day or 3-day or 4-day projects that you're going to volunteer for. So that was discussed at some length in the group. A lot of discussion about the relationship-based nature of the film project. How much time do we have?
Not much.
Not much.
Not much. Okay.
Not a lot.
So relationships suck. We're going to move right on, and we're not going to talk about that anymore. And I'll see if there's any other comment that is important. I think we talked about one thing that everybody seemed to agree on and not necessarily have the answer, which is Seattle is a small and intimate loving, caring, giving community. We all want to help each other. Now, strangely, we all seem to want to do that in a separate silo. We have these different groups of folks who have worked together over and over again. We didn't really have an answer to that question, but certainly there was unanimity in terms of breaking that out. I think this is part of that. Right. This, other than this, we didn't have the answer to that question. So this is the answer to that question.
Thanks. I had post-production with Richard Malzahn, Kirk Nordstrom, Megan Griffiths. Actually, Sue Corcoran and Ben Dobbins. Sue Corcoran was sick, and then Ben Dobbins had a family emergency. So I was going to be in there by myself, and that would have sucked for everyone in there. So I think I can sum it up. It was a more informal group. It was a little more organic. To sum it up, get it right the first time when you're filming. I think that's pretty much what they had to say. Because everything is a balance between your time and your money. Everything is a balance. You can try to do it as you film, or you can try to fix it in post, as they say. And as Richard was pointing out, that's a real phrase that people use. We'll fix it in post. He says he's actually heard people say that. But there's quite a bit of discussion of the culture of criticism and how embracing it helps you in editing. Because this is especially something Meg was talking about, but feedback is such a huge part of editing. And she talked about how if she shows it to people and they don't get what it is she's trying to get it across, so she'll think, okay, is it just that one person? Show it to 20 more people. They all don't get it. Well, that's my fault now. That's not their fault. So using a large sample when you're getting criticism is an excellent way of determining, if it's just one person that doesn't like it or if there's really a problem with it. And to seek out criticism and to not be defensive, because as Richard was talking about, when you're doing client work, they just might not like it because they just don't like it, or they may want something stupid or idiotic, and you will have to give that to them. So that really doesn't reflect on you as an artist. And so you can take that same sort of thick skin and apply it to being a filmmaker. Talked about that. Okay, so we had this little conversation about, I want to have a gunshot. I want to hit. Should I do it in post or should I use a squib? And they said, well, if you can do it real, do it real. How much does a squib cost? It's not that much, but you need to balance that out. So how much does it cost to film that for real, and how much would it cost in post? Now, if you're doing it for free in post yourself, well, then maybe you should do it that way. But I don't know how much one costs. But anyway, so that's what they talked about. So, using effects. If you can shoot things for real and it's cheaper, then obviously you should do that. Final Cut 10 sucks apparently. They had nothing but terrible things to say, but they said it's almost like Adobe paid off Apple to create this shitty product. And that is a direct quote. It said it's like reinventing a wheel that doesn't need to be reinvented. So apparently Adobe Premiere is the way to go. And they said that even so, the editing software and all these things, they're just tools. But you need to learn how to use these tools, because once you get past problem-solving mode and you get into creative mode, that's where you want to be. You want to be in creative mode where you don't even see the software, you don't even see your tools, you just see creation. And one last comment was that if we put the same scrutiny into the script as we put into post and editing and effects, every film would be a blockbuster. Okay, so the next is distribution. Steve, you ready? You want to switch up?
Well, we're halfway done.
You'll punt?
You'll probably say I'm out of time. So distribution was actually a really good, vigorous panel discussion. We had Beth Barrett, Mark Lipsky, Adam Sekuler, and John Sino. And interestingly enough, we had sort of all elements of the spectrum represented in terms of sort of old school, new school, I think, and made for a healthy discussion. I will. John kind of started us off with, and if you heard him in the morning here, you heard a little bit of this, but it was a great statement. I mean, the old model of distribution, we had different viewpoints, so we didn't all necessarily have a consensus around this. But John, the old model of distribution is gone. There are good and bad components to this. We have a loss of sustainable income from that traditional theatrical DVD online. Hard to justify financing at this point for distributors, based on the sort of the disappearance of the traditional model of revenue. There are a lot of online formats now. We have all kinds of ways to get our films up and out there, but John was pointing out that we aren't seeing money from those, that it's a really small revenue stream. And so the future is coming, it's not here. We seem to be in this wonderful and horrible time right now. That is wonderful because we've solved a lot of problems, but it's horrible because we haven't figured out the revenue piece yet. And so we had a lot of discussion around that. Beth talked a little bit in terms of film festival circuit and the importance of theaters. Sort of reflect. We started talking about film festivals and then really devolved into theaters. And we had a really interesting debate about the future of the theater. And as you might expect, there was a component of the panel that was theaters are never going to go away. They'll transform, but there's a communal experience and it's important and it will survive. And then there's another component of the panel that was like, they are so gone, they're already gone, you don't know it yet. And so there was some healthy debate. I think there was some consensus around they'll always be here in some format, but the endangered species is the cold multiplex. The species that will survive is that sort of niche theater that has a real role in sort of an organic experience with the type of films that are being shown. So that was an interesting discussion. I think that was probably an accurate framing of the challenge in the larger industry. We had some discussion around short film distribution. So we were thinking features, and all of a sudden a question popped up. I got shorts, I want to know what to do with them. We actually had lots of ideas around short film distribution. I think we all agreed no one's going to get rich making a short film, typically. But there were reasons for making short films. The traditional calling card reason, the reason that it might be part of a feature film pitch. And then we had some discussion about actual concrete things that are being done so you can get your film out there and make dimes. And basically the theory is get it out there as many places as you can. All of the online channels you can get it at. If you get a bunch of dimes from all those different non-exclusive channels, at least you're seeing some revenue back. And then there are some traditional distributors that do short films and you can access them. And kind of a tip that was floated was the Palm Springs Shorts Fest. So if you're a short filmmaker and you don't know about the Palm Springs Shorts Fest, it's not just a film festival, but it is a film market for short films. You can see me afterwards or anybody on our panel, but it's a really good place to be if you're a short filmmaker. If you submit to the film festival in Palm Springs, you will get into the market no matter what. And that can be useful if you're trying to sell your film. Lots more. Let's see if there's anything we got to talk about. We had Randy Brinson from PBS in our audience, and we had some discussion about the opportunities that have been created by PBS, KCTS9, who's the local affiliate for PBS, and their Real Northwest series, but also an amazing question got asked. So here's somebody from PBS, I don't know, is Randy in the room? The question was this: what else can we do? So here's a broadcaster in a room of filmmakers saying, what else can we do? So I applaud you for asking that question. He was pummeled immediately with all kinds of ideas. Mostly code for show my film. But everybody wanted to know. But really interesting discussion around can a local broadcaster with the power of television that still exists either support that release in some fashion or enhance in advance of the release in some fashion the promotion of the film. And I think the consensus in the room is that kind of partnership is really potentially exciting, Randy, because that medium is still the marker, right, of success. So we appreciate that, and that was a great discussion. We had, since I'm a lawyer and that's my day job, we also had a little bit of lawyer talk, and that was very exciting for me personally. And that lawyer talk was this. We talked about at that point that you are lucky enough that a distributor comes to you for whatever reason, successful festival run, whatever it is. Really, if you've been lucky enough not to have to pay a lawyer up to that point, that is the time. That is the last moment in which you probably have control over this thing that you've been living with and breathing with and loving and nurturing. Because that distribution deal, if it's anything close to traditional to, almost anything, is going to take the rights to that film, forever and ever, amen. And from that point forward, there's very little you can do other than your own independent promotion of that film to move it. So that is the point where, if any point, you probably need some support that you might not have paid for before. Everybody kind of agreed. And it wasn't me, the lawyer, saying it. It was everybody on the panel said, get a lawyer at that point in time. on the distribution deal. Big deal. So I'll stop there.
Excellent.
That's most of it.
Very nice.
Okay. We didn't stop there. We just kept going.
Yeah, we noticed. We were waiting for you people in this room. So I'm totally sorry to Chris and Jennifer for not mentioning you guys earlier. They were my first panel and they were totally awesome. But my second panel was transmedia, which was David and Matt and Forrest. And we talked about all sorts of things. And it was amazing how quickly the time went. Everybody's like, oh my God, no, we can't be done. I'm sorry. So we started with what exactly is transmedia, because nobody has really defined it very effectively, and we ended up with probably about a half a dozen amongst 3 people, different interpretations of what it could potentially be. We've got cross-platform, we've got multi-platform, which basically means that you can break your narrative up across different media, or you can actually tell the story in different media. And somebody actually even posited that just somebody who's using the new technologies in a way that you're not expecting. Good enough, I call that transmedia. So really, we're kind of dealing with something which is completely amorphous to a certain degree and trying to pin it down. So all of our talk was really intense and really awesome, and in some ways, kind of fruity. So they were asked, how can you start to think about things in a transmedia way? The answer to that was very largely plan it in advance. Don't just throw something cross-platform at your story after the fact. And they did bring up the very good point of not every story needs to be transmedia. Sometimes it's not the right thing for you. So think about what you're telling. Tell the story that needs to be told, but no more. And if that actually really effectively can be better told with having something else, a comic book or an app or whatever, then work on integrating that beforehand holistically instead of, oh yeah, we need an app. Building t-shirts, whatever we want to do. Yeah, t-shirts, everybody loves them. So think of your story and who is your audience. It's really just like the rest of this storytelling. It's just like filmmaking, except you have more pieces. Who specifically are your trend makers that would like it? So you kind of think about your distribution as you're crafting your product. I like Forrest said, there's people who, people like personalities and people who tweet about what they eat, and everyone's like, oh my God, Justin Bieber had steak for dinner. So find those people and ping those people and make sure that they know that you have content they're interested in. We did talk about the true fan model. We actually talked about 3 major models of how one can actually produce the transmedia. So funding models. The true fan model, which would be basically they give you money and you produce content for them. That's kind of awesome. That you need to establish yourself for. You need to actually build up a personality and a fan base and have people who are willing to give you personally or your organization money. Yeah, I know. So that's not always the easiest choice. Of course, neither are the other 2. You also have your subscription, so something like NPR, where they come to trust the brand well enough that they will actually subscribe ahead of time. So it's not on a per project basis. It's we're going to give this organization money and they will just send us content as it continues to develop. And the third is a business funded model, which we're seeing some with something like the soap operas way back when, which was companies are just giving money to producers to make content and not actually engineer it for the company itself. So it's marketing, but only in a who is sponsoring it sense, much more like the PBS model or the NPR model. Oh, let's see, we've got that. Big question, is transmedia just marketing? Yes and no. Right now, to a large degree, it is. But as people are starting to develop cross-platform content on a personal scale, on a lower scale, on an indie scale, you're seeing more and more really innovative projects that are ultra low budget and are breaking the, oh, it's just a marketing scheme mold. That very easily led into how does one incorporate transmedia on a very tight budget? Again, we were discussing, you need to tailor it to what your story is. So only build as much as you need and use what you have. We were talking about the massively siloed but hugely diverse communities that we have here. Everybody knows a techie. We live in Seattle. So when we were talking about the film and music happy hour, everybody kept saying film and music happy hour. It's the film music interactive happy hour. So the challenge was all of the film community to the next happy hour needs to bring an interactive person. We can actually break down these silos and bring more people in who actually have the skill sets that we need to tell our stories across various platforms. Techies want sexy projects too, thank you. I think that was kind of like the quote of that particular one. Another really good one is that the gatekeepers of 10 and 20 and 30 years ago, it was their job to say no. Nowadays, it's the gatekeepers, it's their job to say yes. Yes, send me more content. Yes, I like this. Yes, I like this. Share, share, share. So make sure that you know who the gatekeepers are for what your content is. If they like kitties or bunnies or sci-fi, make sure that you let them know that you've produced something and that you're releasing something and send it to them, because they can't share it if they don't know about it. And the last thing that we touched on was the development of youth in transmedia, and who was the worker of the 21st century. And I think that the consensus amongst the panelists was that film schools, the way that they are currently modeled, teach you how to build film, which is awesome. We love it, that's why we're here. But that is not necessarily where things are going, and if you want to learn transmedia, maybe finding new models of education for the young people with apprenticeships and mentoring, and so learning how to do filmmaking as well as learning how to build the bridges to talk to the tech people, as well as learning how to incorporate other concepts into your storytelling platform models. And I think that was where we ended up.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. We have them back.
Yep, a couple more logistical things, and then we'll bring Ben Andrews back up for a closing comment. So the Seattle Film Summit is part of the Local Sightings Film Festival, and there is a showing tonight, and you're welcome to attend that. But because of that, we do have a hard out at 4:30. We do need to be able to get out of here so that people can come in and enjoy the showing. We'd like everyone to socialize after. There's a couple places close by. I'm going to Boom Noodle, and I know a few other people are. And then there's Barrio right across the street, half a block. So, Ben, you ready? Here's Ben Andrews with our closing comments. Take your shirt off.
That was that one time, Ben. Yeah. Wow. Should we do it again next year? Yeah. My brain's still spinning from every. I kind of hopped around and went into each session, and you guys are all amazing. Panelists, delegates, audience. I'm really inspired by our community, and I know one thing for sure. If we just keep coming together and we keep trying to break down these silos, man, we have a bright future, and I'm excited to be part of it. So logistically, we're going to get these videos on the website. Stay tuned for that so that you wouldn't have missed any panels, and they'll all be on there. We're going to take this content, we're going to put it into a draft charter recommending some action, as we said in the opening comments. And Ben, we can commit to that in a month, right?
Oh, yeah. What?
I didn't pre-cover it with him, so we'll get a draft of this charter and we'll start sharing it with everybody, and we'll go from there. Anybody have any questions or thoughts, concerns?
I have a question.
Yeah.
About, we know who the delegates are. We know who the panelists were. Is there a way to connect all the folks who were actually here? One master list of contact information so we can all keep in touch.
Yeah, we have the information.
Very good. And we've got the Facebook group that we can, you know, speak casually on.
Yeah, yeah, we can for sure make that happen. Again, this is about our community, so whatever we can do, and please feel free to ping me at any time, or any of us, and for your suggestions of how we can make this better next year, information that you might want to receive, or even if you have thoughts about this charter, information or movement that you'd like to see in it. What's up, brother?
For doing it again next year, how about a report card on all the things that people suggested we could improve in a year?
Ooh.
Nice.
I like that. That's great.
So I'm actually going to get back to the whole email contact list thing. How about if we say that go on to the Facebook and, well, Facebook, I love that, the Facebook page, and message the Film Summit. So anybody who does opt in, we can distribute
Yeah.
those, but we're going to make it an opt-in because, Brent, you know, willy-nilly sending off people's private emails, probably not the best idea. So anybody who wants to be in contact with the community, send your email in a message to the Film Summit's Facebook.
That's a great idea. Thank you. And thank you again. I love you guys.